Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Miami-Dade Chamber of Commerce and Jackson Health System Small Business Technical Assistance Workshop. We look forward to this amazing conversation. I want to thank you for joining. Come on in, make sure you say hello in the chat. We are also going to go live on Facebook so that you can, if you're on Facebook, you can share that with people that may have not been able to register on Zoom, but we want to make sure they get this information. So you'll be able to share the link. If you go to Miami-Dade Chamber of Commerce Facebook page, you'll be able to see this live broadcast on Facebook. So we will be going live in just a few moments on there. We will start this presentation in about less than a minute, but I'm excited for you to be a part of this process to make sure that you learn how to read a contract. So welcome, welcome, welcome. This is a networking opportunity. So make sure, as always, you put who you are, what you do into the chat. We like to make sure that you are taking full advantage of this time that we have together. And as always, sometimes we're not able to be in the room and do these workshops in person. We do have in-person workshops, but still we want to make sure that you are sharing your business, what you do, your contact information. You never know who is in the room. You want to take full advantage of that. So we are going to go live on Facebook and get this started. All right, welcome everyone again. My name is Matthew Pilot. I'm Director of Small Business and Membership Services at the Miami-Dade Chamber of Commerce. And today we have a very special panel. This is part of our series we've been doing in government contracting, a two-part series with our partners at Jackson Health Systems and Miami-Dade County to help prepare small business owners on taking full advantage of government contracting. Our last series was on how to read a bid, and today is going to talk about how to read a contract. And in doing this, I like to have my partner in prosperity and government contracting come on for many years. She's been the director of supply diversity and small business enterprise, Amber Lawhorn. She is an amazing person. If this anybody you want to connect with at Jackson Health, to help your small business get government contractors who've been there, who had experience with hundreds of businesses going through this process, Amber Lawhorn is the plug. So make sure you take note of who she is and what she do. And Amber is going to come on and she will introduce the rest of our panel. And I'm going to take a step back in the background. I may jump in sometimes, but I want to bring greetings on behalf of Miami-Dade Chamber of Commerce, our president, Eric Knowles, and also our program manager for our SBA program, Gina Ortella, who's in the back end doing a lot of the work to set this webinar up. So with that, Amber Lawhorn, you have the floor.
Thank you, Matthew. Good morning, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here again with the Chamber. I was thinking back on, when I first came into this industry, the Chamber was one of the very first partnerships that we established as we started some really important work 10 years ago here at Jackson. And for about 9 years, we've been doing these technical assistance workshops, bringing important information on how to do business with the government, and particularly with Jackson, to the Chamber's members. And it's been a very rewarding experience. We learn so much each and every time, even if we go back over some of the same topics. From time to time, we still discover new information. So thank you for the opportunity to speak with your members and really share this information and get people excited about working with the government. So today we have some amazing panelists that are, experts in their fields, and we are so happy that they are taking the time from their day to come and impart information with our attendees. So I'd like to go ahead and get started with introducing our panel. I'm going to ask each of you, as I call you, to please introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your role or your company. So we'll start with Lara Greenstein.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here today. My name is Lara Greenstein. I'm the Director of Contract Management for Jackson Health System. I work in the procurement department, and I am an attorney by way of background. I deal with contracts on a daily basis. So that deals with drafting, negotiating, reviewing, working with vendors, working with our business team. So anything that has to do with the contract, I'm involved with. So that's what I do. And I'm really excited to be here today.
Thank you, Lara. Also with us, we have Damian Thomas. Damian,
good morning.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and show your self on camera.
Yes, can you see me on the camera?
Not just yet.
Oh, okay. I think I'm having a technical difficulty.
Okay, that's fine.
I did do the start video. I can see my.
We see you now. You can go ahead.
For some reason you can't see me. Is that correct? Okay. All right. My name is Damian Thomas. Thank you for having me.
All right, so it looks like Damien's having a little bit of challenges at the moment, so we'll circle back to Damien. Damien, if you want to log off and log back on.
Okay, I'll come back. I'll come back on. Right? I'll come back on.
Awesome. All right, you got
Thank you, Damien.
All right.
And last but absolutely not least, someone who is really important to the work that we have been able to do at Jackson and has really supported so many small, minority-owned, women-owned businesses, particularly in the construction industry. Mrs. Ann McNeil. Ann?
Good morning, good morning, good morning. Thank you for that, Amber, and the opportunity to share again. My name is Ann McNeil, and I help women in construction to go to the next level. As the owner of MCO Construction and Services, MCO Consulting, and the founder of the National Association of Black Women in Construction, but more importantly today, the chair of our Miami-Dade Chamber of Construction committee, I'm very excited to be here to share my own personal experiences, the good, the bad, and the ugly, the struggles, the trials, and the tribulations, but also the successes of being on the other side of the legalities of learning or not learning how to read a contract.
Thank you so much. I mean, you really set our discussion up perfectly. So with that, we'll get right into things as Damien starts to rejoin us. So I'll start with Lara. Lara, if you could just walk us through the major elements of a Jackson contract, because we represent Jackson, which is similar to what you would experience with Miami-Dade County, but very similar to what you would experience with other government agencies as well. So let's just walk our attendees through the major elements of a Jackson contract.
Sure. So today I'm actually going to share my screen, and I'm going to share with everyone our Jackson boilerplate professional services agreement. So I'm going to do that right now. Let me pull it up. So this is what our professional services agreement looks like. And I'm going to go through some key areas of it for you. And I'm going to explain some areas that apply to Jackson as a healthcare system and also as a public entity and a part of Miami-Dade County. So I'm going to scroll down. So the first section I wanted to highlight is our conflict of interest provision. This is a Miami-Dade County requirement, and we are required to comply with the Miami-Dade County Conflict of Interest and Code of Ethics Ordinance, and our vendors are also required to comply with this as well. So this is an important clause in our contracts just because it stipulates that requirement. So if you're a vendor with us, it's important that you're aware and you are complying with those requirements. We also have some additional requirements, federal, state, and county compliance requirements, such as complying with the anti-kickback statute, the ADA. So as a healthcare entity, there are some unique laws, like such as the anti-kickback statute we have to comply with. So it's important to be aware of that when you are contracting with us, and we stipulate what's required here.
And Lara, I'm sorry to stop you, but if you could just go back to the conflict of interest.
Sure.
I just want to make sure that our attendees understand what our position is in terms of a conflict of interest.
Oh, okay. That's a great question. And I'm happy to share about that. So if you are a vendor and you do have a conflict of interest with someone at Jackson, for example, let's say my husband has a company and he wants to contract with Jackson, and I'm going to be working on that contract. That's a conflict, and we wouldn't be able to do that. So there are specific conflict of interest requirements that you have to meet, and if there is a violation, you cannot contract with Jackson.
Thank you, Lara.
No problem. Okay, so I also wanted to touch on the maximum contract value and terms of payment. So our maximum contract value is a not to exceed amount for the contract term. So let's say we are entering into an agreement for services and we are paying you as a vendor on an hourly basis, and our maximum contract value is $50,000. If something happens along the line and more work is required and we're going to go over that maximum value, we would amend the contract and we would have to add more funds to the contract. So this is just so you're aware, this is the cap in our contract. The terms of payment is a very, very important provision for you as a vendor. So if you are a certified Miami-Dade County SBE, payments due from Jackson are going to be 14 days from receipt of a complete and proper invoice. So this is a very important part of the terms of payment. Also, if you are not a certified Miami-Dade County SBE, then it's 45 days from receipt of a complete and proper invoice. So in order for the clock to start ticking, this has to be met. So the invoice that you submit has to be complete and proper. I'm going to quickly skip and scroll down to our invoicing instructions, just so you're made aware. So in order to have a complete and proper invoice, you need to include a valid purchase order number, the contract number, the information required here, the services rendered, work performed, the date. So as long as you have that and you have a complete and proper invoice, then the clock starts ticking. So I just wanted to highlight that because that is an important part of our terms of payment. Now let me scroll back up. Let's see. Okay. We do have indemnification and insurance requirements for our vendors. It is important to note that there are times that vendors do not have the insurance that we require. So we do work with our risk management team, and there are exceptions that can be made if insurance requirements cannot be met. Our confidentiality provision is very important to us. There's really two important concepts here. The first one I want to highlight is protected health information, since we are a health system. So protected health information of patients will always be considered confidential information and have to be protected. I will get into that when we talk about business associate addendums, but I want to save that till the end. So the other part of confidential information I wanted to highlight is public records laws. So since we are a public entity, we are subject to public records laws. So there is language here saying that if you're doing business with us, you are acknowledging that all of your communications with Jackson are public records unless exempted by law. So that means if you send me an email to my Jackson account, that email is a public record. Our contracts are public records. That doesn't mean that everything is published online. I mean, technically it could be, but it's not right now. But if someone submits a valid public records request for it, then they can get it. So it is just important to be aware of that in our contracts and that requirement in general. I'm going to scroll because I want to talk about Inspector General reviews. the code of Miami-Dade County establishes the Miami-Dade County Office of Inspector General, and they have the authority to audit and review all county contracts and Jackson contracts on a random basis. I want to point out that this is a unique circumstance when this actually happens. It's rare that the OIG will audit a Jackson contract. It's not like this happens every day. It's rare. But according to the law, to the Miami-Dade County Code, to pay for the functions of the OIG, the contractors are assessed 1/4% of the contract value. So this is a fee that our vendors basically it's deducted from the invoices. So it's important to be aware of this so there's no surprises when you see your invoice and the OIG fee is deducted. I do want to mention there are specific exemptions to this fee. They are very specific though, and it is rare that an exception comes into play, but there are some exemptions, and this is included in the code and in our contracts. We do have credentialing requirements for our vendors, but I also want to point out that we do have an exemption process if, if for whatever reason you believe that someone on your team should be exempt from one of these requirements, or if the staff is providing remote work, an exemption may apply. So we do have an exemption process as well. Another important part are SBE provisions. So of course, we always encourage SBE participation, and for all of our bid waiver contracts, our wonderful SBE team reviews for opportunities. So all of our purchases are reviewed, and we have language in our contract that enforces, our commitment to engaging SBEs, and every bid waiver is reviewed for SBE participation, and we include language here if our team does identify a percentage to be contracted out. E-Verify is a provision required by law. It does require our vendors to verify that their hired employees or their subcontractors are not unauthorized aliens. Again, this is required by Florida statute. I'm just scrolling down here to see the other important piece I wanted to cover is the user access program. So we refer to this as UAP. This is also required by law. It started in Miami-Dade County, and Miami-Dade County required Jackson to implement it. This is really a cost of doing business with Jackson, and this is a 2% deduction of the invoices. So it's basically a 2% fee. Now, where the OIG fee really goes, that fee goes to the OIG. This goes to Jackson to help defray the cost of operations, and this is a mandatory fee. We have a contract compliance section that basically just states that since we are a healthcare entity, our contracts are subject to ongoing monitoring and evaluation, just to determine that the services are being provided safely and effectively, since that is a Joint Commission requirement. The Joint Commission is a very large accrediting agency for healthcare organizations, so it's important for us to monitor contract performance. Living wage may or may not apply to specific services that are provided, but if they do apply, it is very important that as a vendor, you agree to pay the living wage and comply with all the requirements set forth in those provisions of the Miami-Dade County Code. We include the link in our template to make it very clear so our vendors are aware of what's required. And finally, we have our statement of work and pricing. This is going to include the services that are being provided, or if it's going to be items or goods, the goods that are being provided, the responsibilities of the vendor, the responsibilities of Jackson, and then most importantly, the pricing, the fees are going to be included in this part. And so again, I know in the beginning, I mentioned a little bit about a business associate addendum, which in healthcare we refer to as a BAA. This would be an addendum to the contract, but it would only be required if, as a vendor, you were having access or you were going to be using patient protected health information. So if if you were going to be having access to that and using that and disclosing it, there would be another addendum called a BAA, and that just outlines safeguards that you would have to take to protect patient health information and some like breach notification requirements. But again, that's a small amount of our vendors qualify as BAs, so it's not super common, but it's just something I wanted to bring up. And I think that wraps it up. So I hope that was helpful.
Thank you, Lara. Yes, this is very helpful. Again, what Lara just shared is the Jackson contract template. But the important thing to note there is many of those elements you will find in government contracts, across government agencies. When you talk about payment terms, that's really important. Like, how long should you expect before you're paid for the products or services that you provided? The term of your contract, how long is this contract for? Any fees that you need to be aware of, monitoring and compliance. These are all very important elements of government contracts that we want you to be aware of as you go to read your contracts. And with that said, I'd like to welcome Damien back. Damien, if you could introduce yourself.
Yes, can everybody hear me well?
Yes.
Yes, my name is Damien Thomas. Sorry about the technical issue. We're having some lightning in the area, and I think it knocked out the Wi-Fi. But I've been practicing here in South Florida for approximately 24 years. Part of my goal and what I do at my law firm, Thomas Legal, is I try to help individuals and businesses avoid legal issues. And if there are legal issues that they may get into, I try to help them resolve legal issues. I started my career out initially in a small firm here in South Florida. After that, I went to work for a very large firm for some years. And then in 2004, I transitioned and I've been working in my own law practice since that time. I think I'm really excited about joining this webinar today, partly because not only do I try to help businesses negotiate contracts, but I am also, in my business, I also have contracts with governmental entities. So I've kind of gone at this from the point of being the small business owner, which I am. A lot of people don't consider a law firm a business, but it is a business just like any other business. So I've gone at it from the side of advising people, but also from having gone through the process on my own multiple times with different governmental entities. So I'm happy to be here this morning with everyone.
Thank you, Damien. Congratulations on almost 20 years with your own practice. Next year,
Thank
you'll
you.
be celebrating.
Next year will be 20.
Yes, congratulations. And you're right on time because Lara just walked us through what a Jackson contract looks like. And, that's from the perspective of a government agency. But when you're reading a contract, and I based on what you just shared, when you're reading a contract, both as a business owner, but more so in support of business owners, because we're going to have Ann give us a little bit of perspective as a business owner. So when you're in support of business owners, what components are you focused on when you're reading the contract? And from your experience, how many times should someone that's signing a contract, especially a small minority-owned business, how many times should they be reading a contract?
Okay, all righty. I think I'm happy to talk about those. I think from my standpoint, I try to start from the basics. Like I said, I'm a small business owner. I try to start from the basics, and most small businesses, you really may know your craft and you really may know what you do, what your products and services are. The part that's tough, I think, and challenging is converting that into actually having a contract with a governmental agency and understanding what a governmental agency is looking for and understanding why certain things are in a contract and what you need to look for. Number one, and this may seem business simple and basic, but who are the parties to the agreement? And that's important. It's important to look at who you're actually contracting with. Parties is defined as who are the people that are getting into the binding agreement. And with that, it's important when you talk about as a small business, what is the corporate entity that you actually have? Are you an LLC, corporation, partnership? Whatever it is, that has to be the appropriate entity that is actually on the contract and entering the agreement. And that's very important because if you're going to do business with any governmental agency or Jackson, that specific entity must be the one that's, number one, authorized to do business in the state. So you need to make sure you're incorporated properly. You need to be authorized to do business in the state. That's going to be a term that's in there. And not just in the state, but it may be also the county and municipality, depending on where your business is. So those are things you can check into ahead of time. But when you look at the agreement, you need to make sure that the correct information is there. It's the correct corporate entity. You have appropriate licensure. You have your tax ID number that matches up and everything correctly aligns. Because if all of those things don't align, those are things that have to go, are either referenced as addendums in the agreement. You might not be able to move forward.
Damien, I'm sorry to interrupt. Something you said that reminded me that that's a part of our process here at Jackson. One of the things that we vet is that a business is authorized to work in the state of Florida. Where does a business need to be registered to get authorized?
You would go to Department of State. You can go to SunBiz. It's a very straightforward process. They can assist you with that if you need to. You would go there, you would do your incorporation, LLC, whatever entity. I always recommend maybe consulting with an attorney. Designate a registered agent. From there, you can submit documentation to the IRS to obtain a tax ID number. And every entity is going to need that. You're going to need a tax ID. It's going to have to match up and be congruent. But that process is not as intimidating as it seems to some people. It may seem that way, but once you get on there, everything is online and you can pretty much do that pretty quickly. So that's not a problem at all. Finally, I guess a piece related to the parties is also making sure somebody's going to have to sign this agreement when it gets done. Making sure that the person that's signing it is actually somebody that's authorized by the company to sign that agreement on behalf of the entity, because the contract is a promise and that agreement has a lot of different promises in it. And the person that's signing it has to be attesting, they have to have the authority to sign it, and it's binding the company. So if things play out that, for instance, let's say a vendor might not be able to deliver a certain promise that they, to the public entity, then we have to look to the contract, and that person had to have authority to do it. And from there, we would go into as far as from giving advice to the business, as we went into, and I know Lara discussed the scope of work. What actually are you doing? What's important as a business is making sure what's negotiated, that you can actually deliver whatever the product or good is on a timely manner as it's set out in the agreement. That's probably the most important thing, is that you can actually deliver. Don't enter an agreement to promise just because you want a contract to promise to deliver a product or service, because that entity, governmental entity, is going to be counting on you to deliver timely and promptly. So I think it's very important that you not make promises that you can't keep. Most entities, if you're submitting for an RFP or a bid, also will allow you to join up maybe with another corporation kind of together, another company, and you can, sometimes do the bid together to make sure both of you can work together and get it done. But I think that's of the utmost importance, and you need to make sure that you can deliver the quantity or the good or service at the location, at the dates and times. I think that's required. There also may be a requirement, and it's something you need to pay attention to, that you have to submit various reports on what you're doing. It could be that that entity has certain rules and regulations that requires you to submit reports on an ongoing basis on different things that are involved with respect to the goods and services you're delivering. Then we would move on to things like duration. I think it's important to look at how long the contract is, when does it start, when does it begin? And that's important because on day one, when that is effective, you have to be prepared to deliver on day one. So negotiating those terms and making sure that you can deliver what you're supposed to deliver on day one. And also looking into things like renewal provisions. Is this contract renewable after, let's say it's 5 years? Is there an opportunity that it automatically renews, or that you don't have to go through the whole bid process again? That's important to look at as well, because again, you have to be prepared to deliver. And kind of in relation to the contract terms, I think, what are the termination provisions? Can this entity terminate this agreement at any time? How much notice is required? You need to know those things, because especially if you're dealing in a business that requires a certain inventory and a certain amount, you need to gauge and know that I'm not just gonna, buy this unlimited quantity because this public entity is gonna be receiving it from me. I need to make sure that I have enough lead time, but also to make sure that if it can be terminated, that I'm not left on my end with a lot of product that I may not be able to give to sell to another company. Then obviously would move into compensation. One thing that I heard that's very important, most people just think about the amount they're receiving, but the process of actually getting paid is not necessarily an easy thing, because you have to follow certain requirements and certain procedures. I can speak to on my end as a vendor myself for legal work. There's a whole separate software that I have to have even to transmit my bills to the client for review. It's not just as simple as me sending an invoice to that client and asking them to pay it. I think it's a lot more detailed than that. So knowing ahead of time and really digging into the contract to determine how you're supposed to get paid, what the payment schedule is, how I request to get paid, and also reimbursement in some industries is very important too. When you're looking at terms and conditions of payment, you may be submitting to that governmental entity to be reimbursed for certain costs that you may be outlaying on their behalf. So it's important really to understand those terms and to really so that you can sustain that agreement. You want to be able to make it to the end of the term, and you want to be able to either get a renewal or be able to reapply. Finally, I did want to touch on really quick. I know Laura talked about indemnification, and that's a term you may hear a lot. I think in layman's terms, it's important to understand that what that means is sometimes you may have to compensate the other party, i.e. the governmental entity, for some type of loss or harm. And how that may play out, an example of that is, and normally these agreements have those clauses. Let's say you were an IT business and you were doing IT work for Jackson or any other entity, and somehow one of your employees created an issue and there was a problem, there was some sort of breach or some sort of issue that caused that governmental entity to incur funds and costs to either correct it or rectify the situation. You may be responsible to indemnify them or reimburse them for certain damages that you caused, that they had to incur to correct the problem. And I think that's why it's important in the agreement that you understand the insurance requirements, what type of insurance you're required to have. Most will require some level of commercial general liability insurance. It's kind of overall commercial coverage. In my industry, you also would need malpractice, legal malpractice insurance or professional liability insurance. And also depending on what field you're in or how many employees you have, you may need workers' compensation insurance as well. So all of those are requirements. And it's important to really look at those terms and also to look at what may potentially cause you default. Default is basically failure to fulfill an obligation. Default can result in your contract getting terminated. So you need to understand that failure to deliver goods and services within a certain amount of time could result in potential default, and understanding what types of things might cause you to default on an agreement. So that's kind of a basic overview of the things that I look at when I first see the agreement. With respect to, I know you asked me about how many times I believe you should review the contract. As many times as it takes for you to understand everything. Do not enter an agreement without understanding every term and condition. That may mean legal counsel. I know attorneys are expensive, but you may be able to get somebody to review it on a flat fee basis. If they know how long it is and you submit it to them and say, you know, this might be $500 or $1,000. That way, you know what your expense is going to be ahead of time. And I know it's expensive, but getting out of the problem may be a lot more expensive as far as lost revenue and correcting the problem if you don't have legal advice. The attorney works for you. So that's your advocate for you to ask questions to, various scenarios. You can ask an attorney how different situations play out. I think important that you should consider on the front end.
Thank you, Damien. I mean, just between Lara and Damien, we have gotten so much information. But Damien, something that you said that really stood out to me, don't make promises you can't keep just because you want a contract. And I think that is, you know, the meat of this discussion. You've seen from Lara what a Jackson contract looks like. Some of the elements that you're going to be bound to as a part of this contract. You just heard from Damien some of the things that you need to focus on when you're reading that contract, particularly payment. We'll say that over and over again because nobody's going into business to make donations. You're going into business to earn, you know, that income off of that contract. So having that understanding about that process to make sure that you can get compensated for the products and services that you're providing. But that's one of the things I see in working with businesses. I do see a lot of eager businesses, you know, that want to get a new customer. They want to generate business for their company. They're going after business just for the sake of going after business, when really you should be really analyzing this opportunity. Is it right for your company? Are you ready for this opportunity? Is it something that you can actually deliver? Because, you know, we want you to leave with an understanding of what's in that contract is what you are bound to. You're going to hear some strategies and techniques, you know, to make sure that it's a contract that you can live with that doesn't harm you. But so far you're hearing that what's in that contract is what you're going to be tied to. So with that, I want to go to Ann and ask, what are some of the contract elements that owners should want to see included in a fair contract that are not always a part of a template?
Thank you for the question. I'd like to start by just asking everybody to just imagine that you submit a bid, and that bid is accepted for $67,000. And a year into your $67,000, you're at $250,000 in debt. That was me. That was me on one of my first contracts at Miami International Airport in the early 1990s. And I opened with that story because we talked prior to the podcast of this program starting on this webinar about who's really the client that we're talking to. And if you are a small business and you're just getting started, because that's where I was at that time, and you don't know what you don't know, you must, even if you go to LegalZoom, okay, you must get legal representation. And so I just made those comments because one of the things that I think that may not be in a template from the contractor, and this is one of the things that happened to me, is that you really want to be very clear about, and you've heard Damien did an excellent job in sharing, and Laura did an excellent job in sharing. But I'd like to ask each of you to think about, if you are a supplier and you're a small business dealing with one of these agencies, or are you a subcontractor not dealing directly with the agency, because a lot of these legal terms are going to be very different and what you're going to ask for is going to be different. Or are you a sub, or are you a prime, or are you an architect or engineer? Because depending upon who you are, your contract template request may be different. But one of the things that's going to be synonymous for all of us, I would also like to suggest each of those areas that I mentioned, please ask for a copy of the contract of your sub. If you're a sub, ask for your sub's contract with the prime. If you are a sub to the prime, ask the prime for a copy of his contract. And you can ask for that in your agreement. They may or may not give it to you, but it may be public information and you can request it. And then the prime, you want a copy of his contract with the agency. Now, why is that important? For where we sit, normally, oftentimes, whatever they're bound to, we're bound to those things. And many times we don't know what they're bound to. And then we only think that we're bound by contract to whatever they give us a contract for.
And I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I want to make sure, because we may have some attendees that don't understand what a prime is, what a subcontractor is, their relationship to the customer. So if you could just go over what is a prime, what is a subcontractor, what is a sub, what do those terms mean?
Okay, let me start with Laura's presentation for those of you that were on it. If you were not on when she gave a phenomenal demonstration and explanation as she walked through, I sat here as a contractor, and I'm saying, oh, those are professional services. But oftentimes the professional services contract relating to a general contractor. So a sub, I would call a sub would be if you have a subcontract, I'm using the same term, but if you are contracting with someone that has privy to an agency, you don't have privy. In other words, you're not going into contract directly with the agency, you're going into contract with the prime that would make you a sub. Now, if you're not a first tier sub, and in our area of construction, normally the first tier subs would be your trades, electrical, mechanical, engineering, your trades, right? So sometimes we're a sub. So we may be up underneath the mechanical contractor providing materials or supplies. So we may be up underneath the plumber. So that would make us a sub, and the lawyer may be able to give a better definition. But for where we sit as a sub sometimes, or a sub sometimes, to a prime contractor, naturally the prime would be that entity that has a contract directly with the owner. In my experience, and this is what the story that I opened with, I was not clear on all of the requirements of all of the people above me, but I was responsible. And I'll talk about that a little later when you ask about the benefits in my, my journey with the county. But so I start there, but I think that a couple of things that I wrote that are very important, and they were mentioned, but one is prompt pay, but also in your contract, you can add an element for some will agree and some don't agree, but joint checks. Oftentimes, and we didn't really talk about bonding much, but oftentimes a prime contractor will put in his contract and will require a bond of us. What does his contract say that's required of him based upon that agency? Because sometimes some agencies will say you don't need a bond if it's anything up underneath $500,000 or $250,000. But then you may have a prime that you're dealing with that in his template may say, I want you to bond everything, right? So that the bonding, the joint payment, and we talked about prompt payment. Now, in listening to Laura's comments, if you're doing business directly with Jackson, yes, that's the time. But as you know, Amber, when we had the contract with Jackson South, we were second, third tier, and 6 months waiting to get paid. No fault of Jackson's. But my point, though, is that even though Jackson has a prompt pay, if you don't check your contract and ensure that past the template that you are in agreement with whatever you're signing, that it should be, if you're requesting 30 days, if you're requesting 45. The other item I put here was ask for a pencil copy. Get approval for a pencil copy on your first invoice. That is critical. And the reason why that's critical is because we like to sit with especially a new contractor or engineering firm, a client, I call it a client. And as soon as we know we're awarded the work, we want to sit and do a pencil copy invoice. And I'm talking within, if at all possible, the first week or two, because one of the things you should also ask for is mobilization, and it may not be in your template. But even if mobilization is not in your template, if you ask for a pencil copy invoice, what that will do is this, and it can be $1,000. It does not have to, really touch the contract. But the reason you want to do that is you want to be very clear. What is their process and systems that they're going to send you through? You want to make sure that if they ask for certain insurances, certain indemnifications, like we've heard, certain requirements, or they want to pay you, by snail mail, and you say, no, I want you to pay me electronically. You do all of those things. And I think $1,000 is a good number, because if you go through it on $1,000, they may not pay you the $1,000, but at least you will have exhausted 20 to 30, sometimes 45 days, just getting that $1,000 pencil copy approved and understanding what the process is. Now, when your first invoice comes due, it operates like this. So that was one of the items I placed. The other item I think that is very important, and it's not always in the template, if you will, and that is who's funding the contract. Because if you're clear about who's funding the contract, politically as a small business, you are represented by a politician. Now, we don't often like to talk about this. I'm a member of Associated Builders and Contractors, and we have a motto that says, if you're not in politics, you're not in business. Well, I think that as small businesses, no matter what size you are, it is critical that you understand some elements. I host a retreat called Niche to Be Rich. And in that retreat, we talk about these different elements, because no matter how small your contract is or how large your contract is, no matter what you write, and oftentimes lawyers, we don't talk about this, but if you are in a relationship, and Amber, this is, you can't really put this in writing, but if you are in a relationship with a firm that you know is really not a good fit, it almost does not matter what you write. To be quite honest with you, it is not going to work. Now, the other side of that coin is true too. And we've experienced this in 45 years of being in this industry. And that is, sometimes you don't know what you don't know, but you're in a relationship with the firm, and I'm not going to call any of their names because I get in trouble. But you missed on the I, you missed crossing that T. but they're a good firm to work with because of the relationships, and it works out. So Amber, those are some of the things. Of course, many of the things I wrote are already covered, such as the schedule and making sure that you know in your schedule, when are you going to receive your retention? Because that retainage oftentimes is also considered to be your profit. And if you miss that part of the schedule in terms of what is approved, in terms of what that date is, oftentimes it can be disastrous. So I just want to just wrap up and just repeat. Your contract is important in terms of elements, but also your prime contract, to have a copy of that. And also if you're lower under your subcontract, just to make sure you have a copy of that. So I'll stop with those. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. And you gave the information that you gave is extremely valuable. One, because we're talking to many small businesses, small minority-owned businesses even. And at times you want to be a provider for a large organization, but you may not be in position to be a prime. Jackson, we have 7 hospitals, we have urgent care clinics, we have primary care clinics. We are all over Miami-Dade County, from the south to the north, the east to the west. We have services and products that we need, that we have to have a standard across all of our facilities. There are some things that we're going to buy that are smaller. Small business is not going to be able to service us effectively. We're going to have to go with a big business. But it doesn't mean that there's not opportunity for you as a subcontractor. There's a portion of that contract that you can fulfill that could be lucrative for your company even. So it's really important that you really gave our audience that understanding of that prime contractor relationship. I am the entity engaging with the customer. I'm that prime, and then I have subcontractors under me. They may have subcontractors under them as well for that sub relationship. So that's really important, but also, from the perspective of, just because you read a contract and this is what the customer is proposing, that doesn't mean that that's all there is, or that that's all you need to consider as a business. There are some aspects to the operation of your own business that have to be considered, and that there is room to consider them in that contracting exercise. So with that, I'd like to ask Lara, what is Jackson's position on the vendor's ability to negotiate terms of a contract? Because our attendees need to understand, that there is a process in place for that.
Yes, so there are provisions that we have that are required by law, and I know that I went through some of them. So we really don't have negotiating ability for those, but there are other terms that we do have negotiating, wiggle room around. For example, sometimes the insurance requirements, sometimes we have vendors that come in and they don't carry the amount that we request, and we have to escalate it through an approval process of a risk management team, and our risk team reviews it, and they evaluate it on a case-by-case basis, and they might say, you know what, we understand and it's okay for this particular contract. So I definitely I'm happy to say at Jackson, we are very reasonable and fair with our vendors, and we welcome red lines and edits. And, I'm in meetings all day with vendors to talk about contracts, and, we are willing for vendors to negotiate and offer edits for our consideration. And if it's not required by law, we will consider it.
Thank you, Lara. I think that's really important. The contract document that you're getting, that you're given, is not the contract that you have to sign. There are elements that you can go over with the customer to, like Lara said, for consideration. There may be some that they can't bend on, or they can't be modified, but for those that could be for the benefit of your business, going through that exercise is important. Ann?
Yes, I just wanted to just make a comment on what she shared, because I did, and this is one of the reasons why you really should check your bid to ensure, excuse me, that what you're bidding is in line with what was required in the specification. And if it's not, and you're able to find a better price for a different quality of material, to get that approval all the way up through the agency. we had a project that we bid, and it was a tile project. And the tile that we ended up purchasing, 6 figures, by the way, was a slightly different, and we had to replace it all. When in fact, all we had to do, coming back to a lawyer, if you will, and why this conversation and this information is so critical. And oftentimes, and I think you mentioned it, Amber, we get anxious and we think that we're doing the right thing, but the documentation and the legal fees are nowhere near in this industry what it costs when you have to replace work. So thank you, Laura. I just wanted to just mention that because, again, you should have a lawyer all the way through, starting with your bid. Don't wait until you get the contract. Start with your bid to ensure that what you're bidding is in fact what was required. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Extremely important. And, you know, Ann is coming from a window of 45 years of experience. And I mean, in South Florida, I think you can, South Florida years may be 90 years of experience, you know, because this is a very interesting place to do work in. But from the side of assisting small businesses, those are things that often come up, you know, and it gets unfortunate when you see businesses just say, well, you know, that was what it was, and walk away, you know, without trying to have a conversation or really explore all of the opportunities to try to rectify the situation and reduce the harm, you know, to their own business. But Ann, you touched on a topic that I think is goes back to what we were talking about with negotiating, you know, even through the bid process, negotiating. So how can vendors prepare to negotiate favorable terms? Like, what are some of the resources they can leverage to do that?
Well, I would go back to the bid. Always attend the pre-bid. Always, if it's online or if it's in person, always attend the pre-bid and always ask all of your questions in advance. Ask your questions to the agency before the bid goes out. And I think that we take for granted individuals like Laura in her position. Oftentimes, if we look at a forecast, you know when the bid is coming out. Public information request allows you to ask the agencies, and I like to do it in person, but you can ask that agency if there were any previous bids for this exact same bid, because sometimes they're annuals. And you can ask for copies of that previous bid of the people who won and the ones who did not win, to actually see what they bid, the materials that they bid, and also the quantities that they bid, why they won, why they did not win. And Amber, one of the things that I like to share with people when I do these podcasts is start with yourself to study, to show yourself approved. And we can talk about, bids, pre-bids, contracts, and all these things. But if we don't do the inner work and make sure that we study the business, and Damien said it so well in the beginning. He said, you may know your expertise. You may know your expertise, but there's so many other factors about your expertise that you may not be aware of. And oftentimes as small businesses, Amber, we go down that journey, not realizing that we're on the wrong path. So I just wanted to just mention that, because it is critically important that we study not just, our expertise, but also the industry and so many other factors that we don't know. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. And I think, I had a thought as you said that, and it's right in line with it, because it's really important. Your voice in this conversation is really important. You're talking about the construction industry. We are in the healthcare industry, but we need construction services. We're in the healthcare industry, but we need food services. So I think, I want our attendees to understand that you may not be in construction, you may not be in food, but whatever industry you're in, there are aspects to your industry that you need to be aware of. And like Ann said, get that expertise, get that understanding, take the time to learn your industry. You can't just be a master of the work that you do. You have to actually understand your industry. And I'll tell you, the businesses that we support that tend to perform the best is because they understand their industry. They can explain their industry to us as a customer, which we appreciate because we're the experts in healthcare. We provide services to patients. We're not experts in construction. So when we get a construction partner that can educate us on the best methods and the best materials, we appreciate that, and that strengthens the partnership. So definitely what Ann has said, get that expertise, study. I like how you said study to show yourself approved.
Well, I wish I could take the credit for that, but that is in 2 Timothy. So
Yes, it is.
But if I may, just one more thing. I mentioned earlier, I host a one-day event called Niche to Be Rich because of the fact that we can sit here and talk about a lot of things. But what I'm learning, Amber, and even doing business with the healthcare system, I'm glad you said that. I realize that we're in 5 different businesses, and I want to go back to what Damien said. We're in 5 different businesses, especially as small businesses. We think we're in one business. And the 5 different businesses that I'm realizing that we're in, first of all, starts with your expertise, like Damon said. That's the first business. The second business is the business of the operations of your business. And that's what we're talking about today if you're in the construction industry in any area. The operations of your business deals with the legalities of what we're talking about, but also the third business that we're in, and you just tapped into it, and that's the business of your industry. So Jackson is in the healthcare industry, and I'll share a quick story, and I'll leave the other 2 if you're interested. You can text me at 55678. I changed my name. Just text the word Ann, A-N-N, at 55678. But when I started doing business with Jackson, way before the Jackson South project, the ACA requirement is something that we don't talk about when you talk about legal requirements. It is something that when you're going to do business directly with the agency or as a sub, oftentimes we cannot do business as a sub because of that requirement. When you can, in fact, if you study and you know you're going to be in that industry, and I go back to the industry, then all of the areas of requirement you need to be aware of, and you need to do those. Now, the other area, another one to make it number 4, is the association dealing with the industry. If you're going to do business with Jackson or any of the healthcare systems, become a member of the healthcare association. And through that association, then you begin to learn what are all those requirements, because where do people go, Amber? We want to send people to where they need to go from this webinar to get the necessary information. So I just wanted to just share those things because it is critically important, especially if you're going to be in the healthcare industry, that you have that ACA certification. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. And Ann is really leading into what Jackson took upon ourselves to do. Is one of the challenges to construction firms working in healthcare is the Agency for Healthcare Administration. It's a state of Florida agency. They have to come in, they have to review our projects. If we go and we try to put a wall up in a patient area, they have to oversee that entire process. It has to be done to their specifications. They have to approve that area for use after the work is done. So that was something that we recognized, it's a challenge, because if you cannot get the project certified, you cannot put the area into use, and that impacts our patients. That impacts our organization. And there's no specific certification available. I can't go as a business and get a certificate and say that I'm trained in ACA requirements. It really is based on experience. So you can approach a job with experience, but someone also has to trust that you can do that work. You have to have some kind of track record to show that. So we did create a mentor protege development program to support local small businesses to get that experience so that they could pursue healthcare work in the future. other agencies are pulling those type of programs and opportunities into their operations as well. So these are some of the things that you can look for or talk to your potential customers about putting in place to help you pursue those opportunities. So I think we've done a good job of going through a contract, going through the elements of a contract that you need to be aware of, and thinking about areas of a contract that may not be on paper that you need to have a discussion with your potential customer about putting on paper. So I'd like to ask everyone, just give me the one area that you think small and minority businesses should pay the closest attention to when reviewing a contract. Just one area. Lara?
I would say for sure the scope of work. Exactly, it goes back again to what Damien said and what Ann touched on. You have to know what exactly you're going to be providing, whether it's goods, whether it's services. You have to know what the deliverables are, because you are signing in, you're going to be bound to deliver. And then also the fees. You want to make sure everyone's on the same page as to what the pricing is going to be. And then if you are contracting with Jackson, I would say definitely to pay attention to the UAP and the OIG fees that are included, just to ensure that there's no surprises when you're paid. So that is what my response would be.
Thank you, Lara. Damien?
For me, I would say, and I would have jumped at Lara's answer, I think that's really the most important thing is the scope of work. But I want to just go back a little bit and mention from my standpoint as an attorney, I think one thing that you can look at as a business owner, one way you may really be able to cut down on what your legal fees are, is knowing exactly what parts are negotiable and which parts aren't. That's what really gives you leverage to really maximize what you're going to be getting. What that takes is research. When you go to an attorney, a lot of what they're doing is research. Most people think attorneys just know the answers all off the top of their heads. They know the answers to some things, but most of the time they're sitting at their desk looking things up and figuring it out. And then they're going to the client with the options and the answer. So from my point, most rental entities have liberal sunshine laws in Florida, Chapter 119. You can find almost, as Ann said, almost every prior agreement, either on the web or by asking the entity itself. And that will give you an idea, okay, specific contract terms as pricing. Let's see what all the 2-3 prior people were able to negotiate. So maybe I go in and I go based off what they were doing as opposed to maybe what was thrown out. No customer wants to make an offer to pay a maximum amount. That's not the way contracting works. But so what that will give you an idea as to which areas am I actually able to negotiate. And so it's going to take research on your part, but that research is doable, it's available and online. And in conjunction with that, you can look up that particular entity's rules and regulations on what's required. And additionally, with respect to negotiating terms, I think, as Ann said, what would be important, one of the main things is if there is a bidding process, pre-bidding process, is make sure your face is in the place. So that means you are there, you are asking potentially questions, you're hearing questions, you're hearing what they're saying. That gives you an idea as to what's negotiable and what isn't. And a lot of times there'll be a period for you to submit written questions. Have your questions ready ahead of time, submit them. You may get an answer back. We're not able to do certain things. And that's what gives you the edge to really knowing, I think, what you can negotiate, what you can't, and negotiating the most favorable terms for your business.
Thank you, Damien. And I'm going to ask you the same question. The components that small and minority businesses should pay the closest attention to.
I would say relationships. I think you asked for one. If I had to choose one of the very many, I would say relationships. In the last 7 days, I have been in conversation with a number of individuals, 3 to be exact. One, I was on a panel, Miami-Dade Chamber panel with Mr. William Berry. And if many of you know Mr. Berry, he is probably the one of the #1 Black business owners in Dade County, if not the state, and one of the largest. And I don't want to call the numbers wrong. He may have hundreds of employees. I'll leave it at that. 2, 3, 4 hundreds of employees. And on the panel, he shared a story about getting a contract with Miami-Dade County and not being able to get paid for months. And first, they didn't want to give him the contract. And because of his relationship with his local commissioner, Dennis Moss, this goes back years ago, it allowed him to get paid. He went back again, another issue, same agency, not Jackson. Okay, this is Dade County. And he had another issue dealing with the scope. And he had to go back to his relationship with his commissioner to get that scope right after the contract to get paid. Now, what's my point? I get a call from a member of another organization that I'm the founder of, the National Association of Black Women in Construction, and this African-American female has not been paid at all. I say, you know what? You go, you have relationships. A year, she did everything, calling the bond company and going through all of the agency. She contacted her. Yes. Her relationship with her political person who was over that airport, they wired her that money. They wired her the money. And so I'm writing a book called The Know, Like, and Trust Factor, because I know from my own experiences, and I'm not going to go through them, but a lot of what we see other people do is all political. And it does not matter the size you are, access to information. When you are a taxpayer, access your relationships across the board. And so I would just go to the relationships. Thank you.
Thank you all. That last statement, and is so important because we are all taxpayers. We're all funding our government agencies. We work for you. Lara and I work for you all. Everyone on this call, Lara and I are responsible to you. And that is across the board, across government agencies. And I talked to a lot of small businesses. I had that conversation earlier this week. I'm trying to do it on my own. I want to fix it on my own. I don't want to ruffle any feathers. When you have advocates built inside of these agencies to support you. So never hesitate to reach out to your advocates, never hesitate to reach out to your political, individual to assist you in the process. We report to you. So thank you Ann for bringing that important point to this discussion. As we get close to coming to a close, because we do want to answer a couple of questions that have been asked throughout the program, but I just want to ask Lara and Damien, based on our discussion today, we're talking about government contracting, and sometimes we come across businesses that are intimidated just by the word government. But what advice would you offer to small and minority businesses who may be avoiding government contracting due to the perception that government contracts are too hard to read or respond to?
I would say on my end, working for Jackson, I know we're always happy to help vendors clarify any confusion they might have regarding contract terms. So I definitely understand how it could be intimidating to look at a government contract with all the terms in there. And it's very important to understand those terms and what you are signing, but utilize us. As Amber said, we work for you. So pick up the phone, give us a call. I know our procurement team is always happy to help. If you have any questions about the requirements or you need clarification, we're happy to help, and we're happy to help explain. So don't be intimidated. of course, always get a lawyer. That's always the best too, but we're happy to help on our end. We want to make the deals happen.
Thank you, Lara. And Damien?
I agree with Lara. I think the number one thing is the terms and conditions, but like with anything, once we become familiar with anything, we become more comfortable with the process. So I say that to mean doing your appropriate background research and just becoming generally familiar with the terms and how the process works. As you go through the process, especially with the pre-bid, questions can be answered. Most staff and entities, they want to help you. Some people think, oh, it's this intimidating. They want to actually be able to qualify you to give you the business. So you will find some allies that are there. Another way would be try to get a business mentor that can assist you, that's been through the process, that can answer certain questions about the process and what you need to be doing. And then I think once you get that level of comfort, it won't become intimidating anymore. It'll still be obviously an important process, but it won't be as intimidating at the beginning once you get a level of comfort with the process.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Very important points. And I hope that our attendees, in hearing that from Larry and Damien, believe, that this is feasible. It's feasible to do business with the government. But I'd like to have Ann close us out in terms of giving our attendees an understanding of how contracting with government agencies has helped your company to grow. Because again, we want businesses to understand that we're serving you as government agencies, but there are opportunities to grow and develop your company through working with these government agencies. So Ann, please let us know how this has impacted MCO in so many ways over 45 years of business.
Thank you so very much for that, Amber. And in the limited time that we have, I'm going to put some information in the chat, how people can reach me, because I own 5 businesses. And I would tell five. MCO construction that Amber's asking me about, but also MCO consulting, where we do outreach, monitoring, and compliance for firms that work on public sector land where they have these requirements, outreach, monitoring, and compliance. So I separated that business many years ago. And then also as the owner and founder of the Constructively Speaking, where I speak nationally to help take women in construction to the next level. That's what we do. We help women in construction go to the next level in public sector, private sector. But also the National Association of Black Women in Construction, which I'm the founder, and also the International Mastermind Association from the book Think and Grow Rich. So I just have to mention that because it all started with Miami-Dade County. And like I said, I did not know what I did not know. I had a job first working for a company that worked for the county, and I learned how to do business. And so my business grew from starting at a very, very small, and I say small, I talked about that $67,000 contract that turned into $250,000. The county eventually paid me, but what I learned in the process was the different businesses that I am in and all of us are in. But also what I learned is the value and the benefit of relationships and connecting with individuals like Laura. The procurement officers in every agency, city, county, state, even federal government. It is important that each of us understand what business you're in, what craft you're in, what industry you're in. Because of course, when I first started my business and doing business with the county, I wanted to be all things to all people. Does not work. But when I began to focus on one area at the time, which was the facilities with GSA within Dade County government, and I began to realize that connecting with the procurement officer in that agency helped me to understand what was coming out for bid a year, 6 months, weeks in advance. And then I began to do my research with the contracting officer once I understood from procurement months before that project came out. And so that is how my business started, but understanding the value and the benefit of those relationships. And as Amber talked about, we did business with Jackson before the bond, Jackson. I don't know, we didn't talk about this, Amber, but I was fortunate to be on the miscellaneous contract with Jackson for 7 years. And that came out of being on that $67,000 contract. There was a miscellaneous contract at the airport, and they decided to do that same contract at Jackson. I'm sharing these because depending upon what craft you are in, the government agencies are the best place to start your business. I would not totally put 100% of my business on the government, because you also want to diversify your income. That's another seminar for another day, by focusing on some public and some private, but in your niche only. The other area I want to come back, if you decide to go into healthcare, because as we age, there's a greater demand. If you're going to be a painter, and I'll wrap up with this, if you're going to be a painter, and I like to use this example because it's a visual, and you decide, you know what, I'm going to be the best painter there is. That's my expertise. Jackson is hosting an outreach meeting, and they're going after, one of the healthcare centers, and prime contractors come and they need painting and they need a lot of different services. And so they come to this outreach. I'm there, Damien is there, and Amber's there, and Laura's there. Laura's the contractor. And Damien, myself, and Amber, we're sitting around, and Laura comes up and she said, Amber, what do you do? Amber says, I'm a painter. And she says, well, Amber, what do you paint? She says, I paint anything. What do you have? I paint schools, I paint churches, I paint everything. Then she says to me, she said, what do you do? And I say, I'm a painter. She said, what do you paint? And I say, well, listen, Laura, I know you're the prime contractor, and I know you do a lot of business with a lot of different agencies. And I can paint whatever you have. But then when she gets to Damien, and she says, Damien, what do you do? Damien says, I'm a painter. And she said, well, what do you paint? Damien says, listen, I only paint healthcare systems. I have been in the healthcare system painting business all of my career, over 10 years. I know the inspectors, I know the agencies, I know everybody. And by the way, I'm also on the board of the Healthcare System Association, and I'm also on the board for the Painting Association. Now, which one of us painters do you think Laura's going to choose? Now, Damien's price is just a little bit higher than mine. It's a little bit higher than Amber's. But Laura knows that Damien is a painter that she can take to all her projects, and Damien can help her get business. And if I could wrap up with this, Amber, and to answer your question, my business growth in the counties and the cities and the school board has been learning what I just described. Ann McNeil, choose one niche to be rich in one thing. And once you learn how to do that with one agency, which was Miami-Dade County at the time, then you can do the same thing in other agencies, whether it's school boards or cities or counties. And as a small business, please don't try to be all things to all people. Find one craft in one industry and become known for that. So those would be my comments, Amber, and I want to publicly say to Jackson, thank you so very much to all of us we didn't talk about that on the podcast, on the webinar today, but there were many of us who benefited from the bond program that Jackson passed as a part of, like you said, the initiative that Jackson instituted to help Black contractors, period. But again, as many of us know, it started with having a Black person on the board. It started having a Black lawyer within the healthcare system. It started with having a Black person who was over all of the construction and facilities at the time. And the county has a race neutral program. So I want to go back to the relationships and the fact that each one of us are responsible for our financial future. But if we focus on government contracts, you can do and have and be whatever it is that you decide. Thank you.
Wow, I mean, there's nothing else to say. There is nothing else to say. I just want to thank each one of you, our panelists, for coming in and just imparting so much important, helpful, valuable, just the experience. This information is gold. I hope our attendees, you've listened and absorbed and have taken what they've shared with you to really implement these things in your business and understand that there is opportunity to do business with government agencies. You can be successful. It's really about studying, understanding your industry, understanding the customer you're pursuing, reading the contract, not just signing what's put in front of you, reviewing it, taking the opportunity to touch base with various resources, either if it's free online or through paid legal counsel, but taking the opportunity to make sure that the agreement that you're signing will benefit your business in the long run. So thank you again to our panelists. Thank you to the Chamber for partnering with us on this important workshop. Matthew? And I think he's actually frozen. So while he comes back, I'm just going to go over two questions that I see in the chat really quick. How does one get to know about the pre-bid in advance to attend? So government agencies have to advertise competitive opportunities. For Jackson, that's our supplier portal, which you see in the chat. My colleague Miranda, our small business program specialist, is on. Thank you, Miranda. And let's put that link in the chat for our supplier portal. That is how Jackson advertises our competitive opportunities. And on that website, you will see information about any meetings associated with any competitive opportunity. So those pre-bid meetings are listed on our website, but that's across government agencies. So any government agency you're looking to do business with, go on their website to find the competitive solicitations they have available, and that's where you'll learn about those pre-bid meetings. And we also have a question: how can we get a copy of this recording? The Chamber will post it in their video library, and Matt is back to tell us how you can access that.
So first of all, I want to thank you, Amber, and this esteemed panel for really sharing so many jewels during this. This is going to be one of our webinar recordings that I'm going to refer to quite a bit in our technical assistance programs because of the value that each of you have provided and going into detail for many of our small businesses that are just starting with government contracting. They have dropped jewels. I hope y'all have taken notes and really leverage this. As Damien said, use your resources. These people work for you, are here for you. Amber and Laura, they're here for you. They want you to succeed. So if you're looking to get that government contract, make sure you reach out to Amber and a small business development office so that they can point you in the right direction. Laura, she's the one you talk to once you got the contract. So you do that, you talk to her after you got the contract, and then you leverage that relationship. Is extremely important because it's a small community. When they decide on these contracts, when they're talking about great businesses. People want to work with people that can get the job done. As Laura said, at the end of the day, we want to make sure you can do the work. You are following that scope of service. So that's what we're here for, is making sure you're prepared in that. And as Ms. Ann said, like, you have to niche to be rich. Is extremely important. We at the Miami-Dade Chamber of Commerce, we work with small business. We have a free, no-cost technical assistance program. As a matter of fact, let me go ahead and share my screen so that you can learn more about that. This workshop and webinar that we do in partnership with Jackson Health is many that we do over time. And it's a part of our technical assistance program where we sit one-on-one with small business owners to help them get that business infrastructure together. Everything that you've heard them talk about, we're the ones to help you implement that after this workshop. So this program is supported by quite a few people in Miami-Dade County, the federal government through the SBA and our Small Business Development Center partnership with FIU, and also the Miami Foundation to help you get that support. So we're here. We just need you to reach out. And a lot of times we put on these events and you get this information and then you move on and try and figure it out on your own. But there's support here for you. And that's what we do at the Miami-Dade Chamber of Commerce. So if you're interested in being a part of that and learn about these technical assistance workshops, make sure you go to our website, www.m-dcc.org/events. In that drop down, you'll also see the webinar recordings where you will see all the government contracting programs we've done with Jackson Health, from accessing capital to a panel of those small businesses that have actually secured contracts with Jackson Health, talking about their experiences there. So we continue to do this, to have this library where you can learn and grow on your own, and then reach out to us to get one-on-one technical assistance. One of the most powerful things that we do as a chamber that started during COVID was this small business meetup. All these things that I'm talking about are completely free and open to you as a small business owner. But the small business meetup is probably the most powerful because we have between 40 to 60 business owners that come on and share their stories, share their challenges, what they're going through, their resources, and we bring on partners. So every single grant opportunity, every single capital opportunity, they come to this meetup and they share. The directors come. So we can ask questions directly to them. So we're the clearinghouse for many partnerships all across Miami-Dade County to make sure that Black and minority businesses have that support system they need in order to scale and grow. So make sure you join us at our small business meetup. It's on Zoom. You can just listen in as you go about doing your work, going to and from. And if you want to participate, you can cut on your mic and participate. And for our members, we do have a membership breakfast coming up next Thursday. We'll have the president of Barry University on. We encourage you to come out and join us and eat with us, break bread with us, and network with us during our breakfast. It's part of our monthly events that we do, breakfast in the morning of first Thursdays, and then in the evening on the last Thursday of the month, we have a professional networking. As I said, we partner with quite a few people all across and institutions all across Miami-Dade County. So we put our Women's Business Council as a partnership with creating sustainable communities, where they are providing information about home improvement loans. We have our Business Navigator help you create business plans. So all of these things are on our website, www.m-dcc.org/events. And we also do a lot of great things to get you out and about, whether it be our 5K run down south with us, so you can not only network with business owners, but you can get exercise and engaged, or our golf tournament, where it's like the who's who of our community coming out to play golf and really connect. So if you're interested in these opportunities, you can reach out to join the Miami-Dade Chamber of Commerce and be one of our members. As you can see, Jackson Health is a member and a partner. Ann McNeil is a member and a partner, so you can scan this QR code to get information on how to reach out and contact Ann McNeil. She's on our board. She's our chair of our construction committee and has benefited tremendously for being a part of the Miami-Dade Chamber of Commerce. And also Damian Thomas, another one of our members, to make sure that if you want that legal representation, as you see, he knows his business. He knows his niche, and he is there to help and support you. And we encourage you to reach out to them to get that level of support. As you know, we are all in business. This is a referral business. We want to make sure you grow and scale by generating revenue, and we continue to advocate for that. That's what Amber, Laura, everybody wants you to succeed in business, because if you succeed in business, that means you can be a good contractor, you can be a good partner, we can build relationships so we can all expand and grow. So if you need help in expanding and growing your business, please reach out to us. We are available. You can reach out to us. You can call us. You can go to our website. Myself and Gina Ortella, who is on here, a Small Business Navigator Program Manager, to help set all of this up. So Gina is available, and myself, to provide that one-on-one small business technical assistance. So reach out to us. We want to thank you for joining us. And I want to again thank our panelists. Thank you, Damien. There goes Gina. All right. Thank you, Damien, it's Ann, Laura, Amber, for really being here with us and continuing to educate our small business community. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And for all those that attend, continue to grow, be business owners. You are the backbone of our economy here in Miami-Dade County and this nation. And we need you to be successful, to create jobs and literally build our community. So thank you very much. And we look forward to seeing you at the next workshop. Take care, everyone.